And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Championship Wednesday. And we're celebrating lots of championships today. Most prominent is the Rams as they're down at the Coliseum having a good time today with the crowds that are there. But we also have a champion here today from the venture capital community, a good friend of mine, someone who knows our ecosystem well and is everybody's an expert, but Minnie is the real deal. And if you have never caught her podcast where she has been interviewing her colleagues for the past couple of years now, she does a brilliant job. And I can only aspire to do the types of things that she's done. But we have today with us Minnie Ingersoll from TenOneTen. And I'm not going to get into a big biography for her because you can read about her and we'll talk a little bit about her background in the flow of this. But with that, thank you all for being here. We will take questions at the end. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Leonard Lonzi. I'm the managing director of the Preccelerator program. We are a tech accelerator run by Stubbs Alderton and Marklees, a full service law firm headquartered in Sherman Oaks, California. We have a couple of partners on with us today, and I may just call on them to say hello as we represent the firm so I can do my romper room. I see Adrian. Adrian, say hello.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adrian Syhan. I work closely with Len, and although I'm in the Sherman Oaks office now, I wish I could say that's my background here outside my windows, but not quite. Anyway, I do make it down to Santa Monica and work with Len. My background's in technology transactions, and I'm a registered patent attorney. So I do a lot of the IP diligence and related work in a lot of the corporate deals that Sam works on.
Thanks, Adrian. Appreciate having you here. And I see Louis Wharton is here too. Louis, do you want to say a quick hi?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Louis Wharton. I'm a partner with Stubbs Alderton. Hey, and I see you waving. Thanks, Stubbo. My practice focuses on corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions, and I also represent companies in the public securities compliance area. I'm looking forward to today's presentation. Wanted to thank Minnie for making herself available. Thanks all, and enjoy the program.
Thank you, Louis. We share this program with some partners, and Anna Evans is here from TriNet. Anna, would you like to say a quick couple words?
Yes, hi, thank you, Lynn. Hi everyone, my name's Anna Evans. I'm with TriNet. It's great to be here, great to see so many people, and thank you for taking the time to share your insight with us today, Minnie. So I work with early stage startups here in LA, helping them with all things HR. So we help companies with payroll, benefits, HR compliance, workers' comp. We work with companies as small as 3 employees all the way up to like 3,000, and really help build out the HR infrastructure to help our clients grow and scale. We've worked with Snap, Ring, Dollar Shave Club, Netflix, to name just a few. So we'd love to help you guys in that same way. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Our other partners in promoting and putting together this program are Silicon Valley Bank, Early Growth Financial Services, the CMO Forum, and I think that completes all of our program partners for today. So thank you all for your participation, and if you were brought here by one of those organizations, we're happy to have you. So without further ado, let's get into our conversation with Minnie Ingersoll. So let's see how I do this. There we are. Hi, Minnie. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for the introduction. That was fantastic.
So Minnie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey and pathway into venture. What excited you about it, or how did you fall into this, into this big hole of venture?
I probably fell into it. That's probably a fair description. I mean, the most simplest version is I moved back to LA and was looking for a job. I mean, that's kind of how I got here. But I was a product manager at Google for many years. And I then was having my first child and I went on maternity leave. And I thought I was going to take sort of 6-7 months off. I was going to take as much time as I could. And maybe 3 months in or something, I realized that staying home with a child or children is really hard to do. And I ended up starting a company because, you know, having a newborn and a startup seemed to make sense. But that was a company called Shift. So if you guys have a used car, go to shift.com and we can help you buy or sell used cars. And I ended up learning everything about I ended up learning something about venture capital from really going through that process. And like, I knew nothing about venture capital. And we raised, I was actually just talking to someone last night about our Series A. Someone told me take the fund size of the VC and divide by 50. And that's how much money you should ask for. So that was how we raised our Series A. But we ended up raising a couple $100 million over a few different rounds of funding. And I became an angel investor sort of along the way. I'd done some angel investing at Google. I'd also done some direct investments for Google as a product manager. And, you know, I had done angel investments. A lot of my friends who were early at Google had become VCs or become entrepreneurs. So I had some secondhand knowledge, but very different going through it myself. And, you know, just showing up on Sand Hill Road and feeling like I didn't know what I was doing and sort of feeling like a rube and feeling kind of out of place. And by the way, Shift, I mean, we were fully like used car salespeople, you know, that was how I felt. But I very much, you know, built a great network over multiple rounds of funding, you know, really got to know Sand Hill Road that way and got quite involved with like the female founders groups, which were really helpful to me being a first-time founder. You know, got involved with some of the programs. Like when I first was moving to LA, I thought, you know, I'll join the Techstars mentorship group. They asked me to join. I was very honored to join them and join some other female founder groups. And then was like, actually doing mentorship and sort of getting to know all the early stage startups here in LA is pretty similar to what I'd be doing as a VC, except as a VC, it's like considered a job and you kind of get paid and you have sort of a platform. So I can continue doing, you know, the Techstars mentorship program and also, you know, call this a job. So, but really, I mean, when I moved to LA, I wasn't sure whether maybe I would be a COO again, which is, so I've actually at Shift and one other time I was a COO. And so that was kind of I'm kind of general manager. So I wasn't sure that I would do that or potentially be a VC or like, you know, full-time angel investor, but ended up at TenOneTen, one of my partners, Gil Elbaz, he had started a company. The company was called Applied Semantics. The product was AdSense. Google had acquired AdSense. This is a while ago. AdSense is, you know, a multi-billion-dollar business at this point, but Gil was running Google's LA office. I'm from LA. I'm in the house that I grew up in. And so when I was moving back here, I was looking to move to LA for the past decade. I've been talking about moving to LA. And so I've kept in touch with Gil, known him for 15 years. So when I moved back to LA to live with my parents that I live with, I reconnected with Gil and joined up with TenOneTen. That's the quick version of things.
That's the quick version of things. I would love to understand your observations of some of the differences between the Valley and Silicon Beach, as we call it here, in how founders approach fundraising.
Oh, so many different thoughts on it. So this is very rude to the Valley, but like there is an aspect when I was leaving, it was just a little grumpier. That may be unfair. It's just, there was a lot like, you know, San Francisco, I was living in San Francisco and, you know, that was having problems and people were kind of grumpy and people make fun of you when you're a VC. I live in Pasadena here now in LA. And I'll say like, you know, at my kids' school, I'll say like, you know, I'm a venture capitalist and people will say, that's so cool. what do you do? What does that mean? And it's really refreshing because in San Francisco, you know, they make fun of you and that sort of thing. But I think LA has this real, you know, everyone's sort of high-fiving and looking out for the ecosystem. And like, we definitely preference startups that are in Southern California. We are excited about building community in a way that I think you kind of get, I don't want to say like by being an underdog, because LA, like witness the Rams and everything, is not an underdog, but there is a community feel that you don't get in the same way in Silicon Valley, I think. So it's super fun from like a, you know, career point of view to be a VC here. What I will say sort of on the startup side of things is we like to lead seed rounds or participate. We don't have to lead. And then when we look to fill out that round, but really when we look to help our companies raise their Series A, we are doing that almost exclusively from the Bay Area still. So most of our companies, when they go to raise a Series A, we've sort of productized that Series A raising experience for them. Like, here's the deck template, and here's a list of, you know, 100 investors. Let's willow this down to like the first 30 or 40 that we're going to approach. And pretty much that's all still Silicon Valley for the Series A. So, but that's fine. Like, it's a very sort of symbiotic relationship between LA, which has still predominantly seed funds. Now there are some funds definitely that are not seed funds, but for the most part, I'm calling funds that are sort of less than 150 million at this point, seed funds still. This goes to my take the fund size divide by 50, but primarily still seed funds here.
Yeah, and that's an amazing thought process when you think that 15 years ago, and I've been involved in venture now for going on almost 20 years, the money mix of money coming from the Valley down to Los Angeles 20 years ago was, you know, 90% of the money was coming from the Valley. And today, I haven't seen the most recent statistics, but the most recent statistic that I did see still shows that 70% of the investment money that comes to Southern California is coming from the Bay Area. So having those relationships is really, really important. You know, over the past 2 years, we've gone through this transition of understanding how we raise money as founders or how to invest money as VCs. Talk about what that experience and what the changes have been with COVID in particular, and how it changed people's behaviors and gave them access to capital.
Yeah, I'll touch on COVID. I don't have super strong feelings on COVID, but I think also with regard to sort of the capital situation and whether it's 70%, I've seen even higher, that has changed, and I'm very biased. So I'm going to give you my biased seed fund perspective, which is what we're seeing is more and more of these large funds move earlier, right? Like that's sort of, we're all agreeing on that. But I still, in my biased point of view, think it's very beneficial to raise from a seed fund as opposed to, it can go both ways. There's pros and cons, but like our whole incentive is to help our companies raise the strongest Series A from whoever the strongest Series A investor is going to be. And so, you know, some of the, you know, if you're taking money from someone who invests across the life cycle in your seed round, they are incented to either lead the A themselves, or if you're not doing well, then, you know, potentially they're not incented to really make all the introductions and help you raise your Series A. It's not how they're sort of set up. So even though there's this interesting dynamic of the capital coming in, I still think it's really beneficial. And I think a lot of the seed funds here are really thriving because of that, because the seed capital, I don't know that statistic, how that breaks down between seed and later stages, but I bet the seed capital that Southern California companies are raising is actually from local investors more than the later stages, for sure.
No, I'm agreeing with you 100% there. And you know, before you move on, let me interrupt and just ask for a definition, because I think it's fascinating. What does seed mean to you? When you hear the word a seed round, are you thinking dollars? Are you thinking life cycle stage of the company? team, what are the parameters when you talk about a seed round?
Sure. So, because we are a seed fund primarily, but we also do pre-seed. And who knows, but vaguely, I sort of think of someone who actually has a paying customer as graduating out of pre-seed into seed. But like before you have any paying customers, probably you're pre-launch, then you're probably pre-seed in my mind. Once you've launched and even just, minimal revenue, maybe, usually when we invest, someone has less than $1 million in revenue, but they do have a paying customer or two or more, depending on who they're selling into. And so that's usually sort of what I call seed. And for us, our sweet spot is someone who's raising $2 to $4 million. That's where our sweet spot is. But I would call a seed usually sort of in the $2 to $6 million range. The Wing VC, I think, was the one who put out a little sample of before the Series A, most companies have raised between $5 and $6 million now. And so it just used to be like when I was doing Shift in 2013, people would raise one round before their Series A, and now everyone raises two smushy. That's a smushy two, meaning, they raise 2 rounds before their Series A. They raise, $5 million before their Series A. That's usually not in one round. But then because of the notes and the safes in the price round, it all kind of smushes together because people are raising off cycle a lot more. Certain companies more than others are raising they'll always like have an open safe note or something. You see this in like Cameo is the most classic example of this, which is like, if you're Snoop Dogg, I was just watching the Rams, whatever, if you're whoever, Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, whoever it is, and you want to put some money into Cameo, they've always got that safe note open, at different valuations, depending on where they are. So, for us, and now I think a lot of later seed rounds are priced rounds, as in, we're actually issuing shares and doing all that stuff. Whereas before, I think, seeds or at least pre-seeds were really almost exclusively or were more notes and safes.
Sure. Let's talk about what types of industries TenOneTen likes to invest in, and then what do you see as the hot industries here in Los Angeles?
Yeah, we tend to invest in automation, AI, data for legacy industries. That's my best, most simple summary of like our sweet spot is like artificial intelligence for optimizing manufacturing, logistics, healthcare. But it doesn't have to be AI. Like for us, it can really be software, but that's our sweet spot, but we're generalists. So
right.
Although that's our sweet spot, like we're open to other things. We don't do much consumer. And so even PLG is pretty hot right now, product-led growth. And so even within B2B, so we're B2B investors, but within B2B, some people are more like us, which is a little bit like the, how do we do automation for trucking companies? That's one of our big investments. And then there's some people who are B2B, but they're really more like the PLG, the product-led growth folks who are more like a Slack or something, which is really a consumer product being sold into a business in a sense. And we're more the former, I guess. In terms of what's hot, well, okay, first off, everything's hot right now. Like you got a company, I'm sure it's hot. It's all hot. Everything's hot. But it used to be, again, coming from the Valley, my opinion was it's not easier to launch a consumer company. Like I don't invest in them because I find them very hard, but it's easier to launch a consumer company. This still sounds wrong if you have less experience. What I mean is it's hard to launch an enterprise company without some gray hair on the team. So that might be if you don't have salespeople who know how to sell into an enterprise, that's not something usually you can come straight out of school and do, let's say. Or if you don't have product and engineering who know how to build software that meets security standards and authentication standards and know how to deploy into an enterprise, that's harder to do. So in my opinion, LA has certainly reached that inflection point where that sort of talent people who've built and scaled enterprise businesses exists in LA. And of course, we're all hiring remotely, to your question about COVID. But so that used to be, I think, more of a limiting factor to seeing those sorts of startups in LA, which is not to say we don't have a lot of enterprise DNA, like what we've seen, I mean, all over the place with like the aerospace industry and SpaceX, but some of those were not spawning. Now it's very hot. As I said, everything's hot, but for a while, those weren't spawning like the startup ecosystem. It was more, Lockheed Martin than it was SpaceX 10 years ago. So I think hot might be the wrong word, but possible and growing is you can do anything in LA that you could do anywhere else, like including B2B enterprise software. What is hot? I just had some thought about, I mean, first off, everything's hot. It's really a true statement. But I mean, obviously Web3 is everywhere and everything. So I used to read back when it was relevant, like the newsletters on like real estate going on in LA. And like what you'd see was Google expanding, Amazon expanding, Netflix, Microsoft, et cetera, all expanding in LA. And I think that some of that is that ecosystem, like that just makes it so richer because Caltech, when they hire, they call it the two-body problem. And the two-body problem is you're trying to hire a top professor, but the professor comes with a spouse, a plus one, and you need to relocate the two bodies, both bodies. And so I think the fact that there are jobs for people in startups, but also like all of those sort of traditional big tech players are also expanding, means there's just going to be a lot more fluidity and ability to, go from job to job and people to poach and, great engineers to poach and all of that in both directions, I guess. I don't want to only be poaching for my former employer, but that's sort of how I look at that.
Excellent, excellent. Speaking of, so you're a woman founder,
Yeah.
You're a woman VC, and this is an industry that has been dominated by men for years. Are there certain things that you've learned as you've gone out and asked for money for investment, or as you deploy money as an investor? How does the new lens that we're looking through affect the works that you're doing at TenOneTen, or how you went out and raised money? And so let's start with you on the personal side and then kind of talk about the firm.
Yeah, well, so what I'll say is that, so at TenOneTen, my colleague, Austin Clements, he's was a principal at TenOneTen. He's actually started his own fund, but he was a principal with me, and we sat on a panel together. And this was back in the day of physical panels. After the panel, and we both write the same size checks, we're both at TenOneTen, but after the panel, all the women lined up to talk to me, and you could just see it. And all the people of color, he's a Black man, all the people of color lined up to talk to him. And it was just such a visual, like I wish I had a picture of that, but it was such a visual representation of just what we all kind of know, which is you do sort of tend to vibe with people who look like you, feel like you have a shared experience, that sort of thing. And it's really important. And it was, I don't know, it kind of stuck with me in sort of seeing that importance. But, I think, some of it is, my experience of things has been, I'll even start at Google. So at Google, we used to have what was called Google Product Strategy, GPS. And Google Product Strategy was how resources got allocated. And in venture, the resources everyone's asking for is money. At Google, Google had plenty of money. It was just how engineering resources got allocated. And so you'd go to GPS and you were a product manager, and you'd go and you'd bang the table and say, I need this many engineers to build this sort of product. This is why I need it. Here's the great thing I'm going to build. And kind of similar in venture capital. You go in And my first experience was really, still 7, 8 years ago, which I do think things have changed even in just 7 or 8 years, especially for women. But you still would go in and get quizzed. We used to go to the Monday partnership meeting, and there's this huge table full of white men, and they would quiz you on your 5-year plan and, your assumptions and that sort of thing. And so, some of what I think about is, how do we make decisions as an industry, whether it's, Google product strategy allocating engineers, or whether it's, VCs allocating dollars, and are we making decisions because the person who shows up is like full of confidence and ready to sell you something, and or are we definitely making space and sort of thinking about inviting to the table, and like diversity and inclusion, like making an inclusive atmosphere when people show up, that's giving space for people who might like not present in the same way that we're expecting someone to come across. And so, I think about that sort of thing. And then is different aspects, like in my personal experience, some of the most dramatic times for me have been random acts of kindness, I would call it. Someone spent an extra 30 minutes with me, and someone reached out to me at the right time and said the right thing. And they weren't my mentor, they weren't my boss, they weren't my VC, they were just a random someone for some reason said something, and it changed my trajectory, it changed my mindset. And so I think about that when people ask me do I have 30 minutes I can give, that sort of thing, which is like, we don't need to be official mentors. We actually can all really affect change by just going out of our way to help people when we have the opportunity, when the opportunity comes. And sometimes it won't help at all. And then sometimes we'll say something and it'll be incredibly impactful. And so I kind of take that lens to like how I take meetings. Like, it's just sort of can I take more meetings with people who didn't already go to Stanford and look exactly like the person who I know is going to get funded? Can I actually try to take meetings with people where I'm like, I think I have something to share here that might be useful to this person? Or so I think, that's kind of been my approach, which is just, it's nothing grand. It's more kind of on the margins. How do we spend our time, and what do we, how do we show up with sort of the people in our community, and just sort of encourage and reach out into a community that may not just be our exact immediate community. That said, I think things have changed for me as a woman, for sure. I'm not totally sure. I still think there's a long way to go, especially with people of color. Just the stories I hear and sometimes the things I see, I think there's still a long way to go. But at least, for me, being a woman with my degrees in computer science, that has opened a lot of doors for me lately, in particular. Like that has, sitting on panels, being asked to join boards, being asked to do things, it has opened some doors. And so sometimes when I'm talking to like a young crowd of, people in school, I'm like, look, yes, being female in tech and being female in used cars in tech, there weren't that many women. But it actually, like, I don't want to discourage women from sort of jumping in.
Absolutely. Great words of wisdom. Great words of wisdom. So let's talk about deals. When you think about all the deals that you've seen and done, other than your own, are there some that come to mind that, wow, I'm so happy we made that investment, because this is a company that's going to really flourish and bring returns back and do good in the world at the same time? And are there companies that maybe you passed on that you say, darn, I wish I had done that? And why did you pass on it? What helps makes those decisions?
Yeah. So many companies I could talk about. Like, one that's doing really well right now in our portfolio is called TrueAccord. And I highlight it because it's a little, I don't know why it came to mind. I could talk about any number of them, but it's a little controversial. So they do automated consumer debt collection. And it's, debt collection, like consumer debt, like you owe money. And in the past, the way that people collected money when you owe money was usually by phone. And the problem with doing it on phone is it's not really compliant. It's subject to sort of human vagaries. And what TrueAccord has been able to do is show that they can be completely compliant. So you never go off script when it's sort of an automated, artificial intelligence, machine learning, really doing this. And you can really optimize your campaigns, if you will, in the same way you automate like a marketing campaign. And you can really start to understand people on, some people aren't paying their debt because they don't have the money right now. Some people are not paying their debt because they don't believe that they owe the money in the first place. And you can actually start to get, to really build systems to understand people. Anyways, super proud of them. They have, I can't quite remember what their latest number was, but it was like a 60 or 65 NPS score from people they collect money to, because they are extremely mission driven on doing this in a respectful way that actually is helping the world. And now they're huge and they've grown, and now they have, Amex and Capital One and all these huge customers that they are doing all the debt collection for. And they were one that a lot of people passed on because they just weren't sure whether, you can kind of see how, automation could be a good thing or a bad thing. But I've been so proud of the team for doing this in an extremely mission-driven manner.
Excellent. Let's talk about teams.
Yeah.
When you meet with founders for the first time, what are the things that you look for that will help you make a yes decision on funding?
Yeah. So usually it's like, I always say, like, the goal of the first meeting is to get the second meeting. It's not to convey everything. And sometimes, you meet people who are like, in the elevator and they like try to tell you everything. You're like, look, your goal is not to give me everything about your business right now. Your goal is just to like be sort of engaging and have me be like, oh, that sounds interesting. I want to have another meeting. Maybe that's sounds a little crass to me, but for me, the biggest thing is like, after I meet this company, I meet a bunch of companies, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like, am I still thinking about this company? Am I like, wow, I'm still like going over that company for whatever reason. And like, usually for us, it's a reasonably unique founder / idea, which is we like people who are coming from an industry, really understand the industry, and then are like, I have this insight. Like, we just did this one, they're doing like billing systems for hotels. And it's, it's not one where everybody just wakes up and thinks, I know, I'm going to start like a billing system for a hotel. This is a guy who was building hotel websites for many, many years and, actually is deep in the industry. So it's someone who comes and I'm like, oh, wow, you really know this thing. You've got a vision for how this can be done better. Like, I'd never realized that, like, when you check out from a hotel, you can't use Google Pay, Apple Pay, Affirm, fill in the blank, modern wallets. Why is that? Like, I never thought about that really. So it's usually someone who's like, has some deep insight and is able to convey that. The things that I like pass on generally are things that feel like I went to MBA school and got a template and I filled this in and I'm going to tell you about the TAM, SOM, SAM. And I'm like, I don't care about the TAM, TOM, SAM that you calculated in a bottoms up manner or a top down manner or like whatever. Like, I want to know that you're able to look me in the eye and convince me this is a huge market.
So what I picked up in what you just said, or just to maybe clarify and simplify it, is you're looking for passion and you're looking for, industry knowledge, someone who has a deep understanding of the problem that they're trying to solve, maybe because they've been involved in it or they've worked in that industry, but not just it was an idea that came to them while they were reading a book one night.
Yeah, I also, fair summary. I was going to think of something else, but yeah.
All right,
And-
so let me
Yeah.
help you here, Doug, to get off that thought. What are things that turn you off? I think you described some of them. Someone who's coming with the MBA template, they're just trying to get through the meeting and present to you their product or whatever. But how about some of those personal qualities of people? What do you see as you've worked with founders and you've been in the industry on both sides of the equation? What makes people successful? What are those characteristics?
Yeah, so right, your summary, I remember what I was going to say, which is, yes, it's not someone who's like come with a template. It's the thing I worry about is like the VC is not your customer. So, and this is a hard thing to sort of, if you haven't gone through all these pitches, you feel like I want to learn what the VC is expecting in this pitch. And yet I prefer people who have just built a great business and then have the confidence to come in and not actually know. It's not like, oh, we need to build a mobile app to go with our thing because we think the VCs will want to see a mobile app or not see a mobile app or whatever. So your question was like, what really, I mean, sometimes we talk about distance traveled. So distance traveled is like, it's for me, like, what other obstacles have you overcome? What other hard things have you done? Like, I'm really impressed that, like, I mean, the guy who's building the hotel app, like he was sleeping in Central Park. He then learned how to build websites because the Apple store opened on Fifth Avenue and it was a 24/7 Apple store. And they would let him spend nights in the Apple store using the laptop in the Apple store. And you're like, holy shit, like, wow, like that's some distance traveled, and so there's the distance traveled, but like, we all have our own journeys that we've been. Everyone has traveled some distance, right? I don't think anyone's life was like actually easy. So the way one of my partners talks about it is that, most startups fail. Like we've heard that saying or something, but actually my partner Gil believes most startups, if you work at them for 10 years, are less likely to fail. Like if you're still going after 10 years, you haven't failed. And so he's kind of thinking like, is this person going to continue working on this for 10 years? I mean, and that's sort of his lens is like, well, you've got your PhD in bioinformatics, you're going to be building a bioinformatics startup, like you dedicate your whole life to fighting rare genetic diseases. You're going to continue doing that, whether it's exactly this manifestation of it or something else. You're still going to be in this zone versus it's going to get hard. You're going to feel like your career's stalled out because your startup's going nowhere. And then you're like, Google offers you $350,000 to do that. And you're like, well, my career is going nowhere here, so I could go do something else. So we kind of take that lens of, are you going to do this for the next 10 years? And like, that's a subtlety in a pitch, which is like someone who says, my child's daycare has the worst CRM system. They have no way of like managing payments. They have no way of doing marketing. And I've sent 3 kids to this daycare and I'm amazed by it. And I started looking at other daycares and I've learned this problem versus someone who says, Minnie, I own a chain of, a franchise of 8 different daycares. I built this software for myself to solve my own problems. And, those pitches kind of sound the same, but there actually really is a difference, which is like, I've been running daycares for the past decade and I know this is the software I need or something versus, I sort of saw this in passing and thought it'd be a good problem to solve.
And in that example, which I think is a great example, which one is the better investment, do you think? Which one would? Generally,
we lean towards the person who I'm running a franchise of daycare. Yeah. I built this for myself. I deeply understand the problem versus sort of I'm a techie person who saw this opportunity in daycare software and decided to build it sort of a little tangentially. There's no complete like right or, there's no black and white there, but that tends to be where we focus is like, I spent my whole life running daycares. That tends to be where we land.
And I love this, the description, the distance traveled, because I think that exemplifies fortitude. It exemplifies dedication. It exemplifies somebody who doesn't want to quit and someone who's driven. And you need all of those things in order to survive in this industry, at any part of it, in any part of this industry, whether you're a service provider to the industry, or you're a founder, or you're an investor, or you're running an accelerator. I think that all those qualities are very important.
It's life qualities. I don't even know if it's specific to venture and startups. You know, life has some roller coaster to it, no matter what you're doing.
That's a great point. Great point. So as we look at the types of things that you've invested in, and how do you get deal flow? What's your source of deal flow?
Hanging out with people like you.
Thank you very much. Well, what is the preferred method of deal flow? Maybe it is hanging out with me. And
I'm still here.
Something just happened to my computer. It's
you look okay to me.
okay. I'm just going to keep going, and I just see a big picture of Cooper Kupp on my screen now, which is really weird because he should have.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
So and I lost my train of thought because of that. So
It's
hanging out with me is a great
it.
way of deal flow. But if someone, say, who's on the call today, wanted to approach TenOneTen, what is the best method of doing that?
I mean, first off, I do read all of my emails, all of my cold email stuff. I read it all. And it's not the preferred method. I'm just saying it is a thing. And when I was selling used cars, it was the first time I really had a real sales team that was part of my org. Like at Google, I didn't really work closely with like a sales team, but like I learned from a sales team that like they do 10-point drip campaigns and don't think that's anything crazy to like, hit someone 10 times. I'm not saying you should do a 10-point drip campaign, but honestly, when someone sends me one really thoughtful email, two really thoughtful emails, three really thoughtful, I'm like, oh my God, this person really wants to reach me. I better like reply. Like it is, but that is not the same as someone sends me three really unthoughtful emails. But like, and it usually would only like even one thoughtful email. I'm just saying like, I get a ton of poor deal flow. That's just like, we're raising $10 million for our cannabis brand. And you're like, well, I'm a B2B seed stage investor. It doesn't really apply. So it's easy to screen out that sort of thing. It's just much easier with any sort of introduction. So everyone says like, find someone to make the warm introduction. But like, it almost doesn't even have to be someone It sort of is like someone who kind of knows me. But you could almost reach out cold to someone else and have them send me the email, because it just gives me the, it's like, well, Len sends me an email and I feel like I, want to reply to Len. Like it just sort of makes me have some accountability in my inbox. Otherwise, it sounds all like arrogant, like it's very weird to change from a founder to a VC because all of a sudden now everyone wants to talk to me just because I can write checks. It's not like because I'm any different than I was before I started this job, but it's just that like I sit down to dinner at 5:30 with my family and that's important to me. And so, the hours are limited. And so I just don't get to all the email that comes in, but when it comes from someone else, I feel like the social pressure to give it a thoughtful reply.
I appreciate that, and I will say that you do reply, and I'm very grateful when I get replies from you and from your colleagues or anybody that I try to make a thoughtful introduction to within the ecosystem. So that being said, we're getting to about 10 minutes of the hour here, and I wanted to give you a chance to leave us with some pearls of wisdom before we get to questions. So is there anything that, as you've spoken to many VCs on your podcast, what are the bright spots? What are the things, if you could pinpoint 2 or 3 things that come out of those talks or things that come to mind that would be instructive to founders on the call or other investors, what do you think is really, really important when you get down to brass tacks?
Well, gosh, I was thinking about the things, the things I wish I could have sort of told myself when I was doing things is probably like, it'll all work out. Like, it has a way of working out. We went through multiple rounds of layoffs, like things were hard and like life is just hard. And I think if I had found a way of embracing that, but But I'll pull out something from my podcast. I was chatting with Ariane Chute, who's a VC in fintech, and I asked him, like, Ariane, what would you build if you were building any company? And he said, Minnie, I don't care what I would build. I would just build a company where we treat our employees really well and we give them all a lot of equity. And I think sometimes when you're going through like hard startup times, you know, you're trying to optimize things, and and just think about like the big picture of life's short and you only live once, and like just making your company a great place for all the people who are like directly involved with that is something that I would just put more front of mind for myself if I were doing the journey again as a founder.
Love that. I love that. I think that's really important. And one thing we have learned through COVID, as we've all gone remote, is a deep appreciation for our teammates and for the people that we took for granted that we saw every day. And then all of a sudden, for 2 years, we see them on Zoom maybe once a week. And for those of us that have been lucky, maybe we've seen them once or twice in 2 years. So, how we appreciate our team and work with our team is really important. So let's get to some questions here. Brad Heller had a question, and I'm not going to read it. Brad, if you'd like, unmute yourself and ask away.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, thank you for providing so much color on what you guys do at TenOneTen. Looking forward to reaching out eventually, preferably through a warm intro. Anyway, so my question is, you mentioned something about gray-haired experts. Sometimes they're not on the founding team, but you'll talk to a company and they're like, wow, we like you guys, but you don't have this expert. Are you going to help? If you're interested in investing, connecting us to someone in your network to make that happen?
Yes, sometimes, just to be fair. So, things that we care about, like when we're investing, we realize like the full team hasn't been built out. We had signed a term sheet yesterday for a team that they had identified who they were going to hire, and they knew that they were going to hire this, but they couldn't pay the person, but they'd identified people. And there were a couple of people that were going to quit their jobs once they had money, right? That's totally legitimate. Like we have the ability to sell, because what I'm looking for is a lot of startups. I mean, a huge amount of venture in startups is selling. It's really communications generally, but a lot of it is selling. And so what we want to know is, can you sell this to potential hires, to potential employees? Can you sell this to VCs? Can you sell this to customers? Can you sell this to et cetera? And so I do want to know that have that muscle of being scrappy as hell to identify who you want to hire, and but with the constraint that you don't necessarily have the capital yet. We do a lot of hiring. I just personally enjoy it. So it's definitely something that we do, but I would say where I lean in is I do a lot of interviewing for my portfolio. I'm on a bunch of interview panels right now. I don't do as much sourcing. It's not that I don't source. It's just that I just got old, and everyone is like, we want someone in their mid-20s. And I'm like, I don't know anyone in their mid-20s anymore. Not that it's about age, but it's just so I'm not as good at sourcing, but we have a lot of recruiters we work with. So we do make some of those intros. And we definitely do help them. We help close the senior candidates. We help sit on interview panels, all that stuff.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Brad, and thank you for your answer, Minnie. So Roberto Villasenor, I think you have a question. So Roberto, why don't you ask yours?
I sure do. By the way, fellow alumnus from the farm here.
Okay.
Great presentation. Thank you very much. Little observance on the woman's side. You are Pasadena Poly, Stanford, Harvard Business School. So you were more respect than just being a woman from some other school. Okay. I have a very interesting question from your observation of the woman line and the color line. Where would the colored woman go to? My guess is they went towards you.
I don't know. And I actually am more worried about color right now. I think in some sense, I think the point I want to make is what is Harvard Business School supposed to teach you other than to feel confident marching into Sequoia and asking them for $30 million? That's what it's supposed to teach you, or something. I have all of that background, and I still felt very fish out of water, sort of uncomfortable in my own way. So you're right on all of those things. I don't know. I think it's everyone kind of finds kinship in different places with different personalities.
Okay. The other question I have is being introduced by the company itself or having an investment banking firm representing them. Do you have a favorite or one you don't touch it when investment bank introduces you, or it's a good thing, or what?
Pretty much the latter. We don't take introductions from investment banks. Pretty hard stop on that.
And the reason for that is?
It wouldn't be the right stage. It wouldn't be the right. I almost never see it for someone who's raising like raising less than $10 million, which is where we invest. And so you wouldn't really engage with an investment bank for a less than $10 million raise. It also just, I don't know, but it's just not the way things are done. So it would seem odd to me, even in pitches, like I tend to favor when it's just the CEO pitching. Sometimes they bring in more of their team. But usually for first meetings, it's the CEO. And actually it sometimes gets confusing if there's anyone but the CEO, because sometimes it's wonderful co-founders, which I was one of those. I was the co-founder, right? I was the COO, but you kind of step on each other's toes a tiny bit and the message gets muddied. And we want to know there's a strong CEO who can lead this fundraise and can lead the next fundraise, because the next fundraise is going to be led by the CEO, not an investment bank or anyone else.
I see. Okay. And the final one is on I've seen a few food technology delivery services like Buffalo Market and Cartwheel. Can you tell me a little what you're thinking or what you look for those kind of things? What you saw?
Similar sorts of things. I mean, we sometimes say that we invest where we think we can be helpful, but it's really like we just invest where we think we understand the business. Shift was actually a very heavy logistics business. And so I actually just like logististics. So actually I led both of the ones you mentioned, both Cartwheel and Buffalo, because I do kind of like logistics. One of them is spun out of Next Trucking. Oh no, that's Vendor Flow. Cartwheel, like they had built this delivery business themselves because they were a courier. They were doing a courier service. So they built all this software for themselves. And then, people started knocking on their door saying, can we use your software? So it's kind of a model I like.
So your interest is not in the restaurants and food, it was more in the method that was used to deliver. Correct?
Yeah, but then, it becomes self-reinforcing to someone else's question, which I think we'll get to. Like it becomes self-reinforcing, which is like, I see that you've done a bunch of investments in restaurants, which we have actually. Well, I've got a restaurant tech business, and like, that's a fine sort of opening pitch, which is like, the more we do in restaurants, the more I understand different pieces of how restaurants work. And I probably have 3 or 4 right now in the restaurant software space, oddly.
Okay, thank you very much.
I like SMBs generally. I think like kind of to the impact point, like it's kind of interesting to think about how do we have SMBs sort of survive and not just get smushed by DoorDash or Amazon or other things like that.
All right.
Great question, Roberto. Thank you, Minnie. Let's see, I'm gonna push over to Jason Vigo to ask his question. And Jason is one of the co-founders of a portfolio company here at the Preccelerator called BEVS.
Hi, Minnie. First, great to meet you after hearing your podcast many times. So very cool to meet you in person. And second, I want to dig into your comment about getting a hold of investors through cold outreach. So I'm kind of deep in my fundraising now, some warm, but a lot of cold outreach. And you mentioned kind of thoughtful emails or communications or going to someone who knows you. But could you talk a little bit more about what would you define as thoughtful? What kind of pieces other than like researching your website and your former investments or things like that would be helpful in getting a cold outreach to be more successful?
I'm now reading your chat and kind of thinking like, yeah, it's just what you say. So the first is, it's obviously something that's meant for me, right? Like, yeah. Because there's a lot that look like, oh, that could have kind of been written to anyone because of your successful investment strategy, as opposed to like, because I heard you speak on the LA Venture podcast. I know that you like restaurants, whatever, like that's a strong one. No, that just makes me look good. But but I do think it's just like, it looks like it's meant for that person. And you can kind of ask anyone. Like, I don't want to like over volunteer myself and over promise, but like, you can kind of ask me. There's no harm in asking me, like, Minnie, will you just forward this to someone? Like, just hit forward. And it's a really easy thing. Like, I can do that. I also we did some cold outreach. But a lot of it for us was just like looking at people's domain and then just like trying their first name and then trying first initial, last name. And we did do that, some of that. But I think it's kind of it almost leaves a slightly negative taste, I think, in investors' mouths, like, oh, this person came in cold makes you, I don't think it should, but I think people are like, it's not as strong as this came from, like Len at the accelerator or something. Like, it's just like having kind of knowing where it came from does help. And you can ask people to help forward things along. And you can ask me too. I just don't want to overpromise, but like, you can definitely ask me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Let's see, I'm gonna go over to Lamont Gibson. Lamont, why don't you ask your question?
Yeah, thanks so much, Len. I really appreciate it. Minnie, I'm intrigued by your comment earlier. You mentioned poaching. The IT talent is a critical part of any enterprise, especially at the startup stage. And that, I would imagine, can be pretty touchy in certain situations. I'd like a little bit more color, if you will, on that comment. If you could just offer some guidance for those of us who are at a stage that maybe we really need to make great decisions at that particular point in our journey.
I mean, I don't find, when you call it poaching, it sounds sort of negative. I don't find recruiting sensitive. Like, I'm like, maybe I'm a little cutthroat on it, but I'm just like, when I see someone who I really want, like at Shift, we identified the director of engineering that we want. And like, we went after him for like 5 months and he said no like 10 times before he said yes. But like, we wore him down finally. And like, and then he was great. And then he was super happy at Shift. So, I mean, again, I think it's especially with engineers, they're bombarded with cold emails. So like, that's harder. Hiring great, especially diverse engineering talent is probably harder than getting VC funding, in my opinion. I don't know. But I mean, in terms of cold outreach is really hard. But I do think it's a going after the people, finding people in their network who can speak highly of you, having your investors go after them. But I don't feel I think it's, kind of a free market, and people change jobs nowadays in tech every 2 years or so, sometimes even less. So I don't feel bad trying to just go hard on recruiting people. And I think it's all, we invited that guy to dinners. We took him out. We just got to know him. We can't even remember what we did. We had him over to our holiday parties. Like, we did all that stuff. So I just am a sort of you just have to be really persistent and really directed on like why this person's going to be amazing and what you can offer them.
So tenacity is the word.
Tenacity is the word. Tenacity and equity, I think.
Okay, got it.
Super.
Thanks,
Lamont. And then Amy Wood from Pepperdine has a question. So Amy.
Hey, thanks, Lynn. Hey, Minnie. Minnie, you mentioned a few ways in which you help your portfolio companies. You mentioned helping them raise their Series A or their next round, helping interview candidates. And so, what you're diving into a little bit is the relationship that you have with your portfolio companies. And what would you say either distinguishes your firm from others in fostering and cultivating that relationship and the support you provide for founders, or what, maybe just a very baseline, what should founders be expecting from their investors?
I actually think there's lots of good seed investors. Sort of the punchline that I've heard is everyone loves their seed investor. Lots of people do not like their Series B investor. But your seed investor is like, we just like gave you $3 million and took this huge bet on you when you were kind of no one. And like, it feels good in both directions. Like, not that you were no one, sorry, that sounds so negative. But
from the early point, yeah.
From the early point, like, we've seen you when it was like really just in the garage, and then like, and you become close with these people. And so people do tend to like their seed investors because they also tend to be very aligned in like next steps and that sort of thing. by later stages, it sometimes gets a little harder. And, you know, you got really people who are really like quizzing you on your financials and stuff. Like, we're kind of like believe in the dream sort of investors still. So I do think, though, that I have we co-invest all the time. So almost all of our rounds are co-investing. So I sit on boards or even non-boards with a lot of other investors who have different styles sometimes. And I think different things work. So we like to be quite involved. So when we do a kickoff where we say, would you like a weekly meeting with us? Would you like a bi-weekly meeting? Would you like a monthly meeting? You could do less than that, but we actually usually don't recommend it at the start. And what happens is we just get to know the founders really well. In like our kickoff meetings, we do a lot of defining what would be most useful to you. But what tends to happen is that like every company ends up being very different. And the nice thing is in the seed stage, like it's just very bespoke to the company. And so, you know, it's a lot of my time, it's one-on-one time, and it's just, here's the stuff that came up this week, this month. And, you know, I never would have thought we help with PR a lot, but we help with PR a lot. You know, that keeps coming up. Someone's like, I want to announce my first round of funding. Well, great. We have a big founder resources thing. And that includes like, here's the PR person. She charges $150 an hour. She's really good. And she writes all of our PR announcements. But it's just it really is the way we think of ourselves. And I think what's sort of helpful about us is both of my partners are really strong founders. Like one of them has started 3 venture-backed businesses, had an IPO, did all that stuff, sold one to Microsoft. The other guy built 2 very significant businesses. And so we're kind of like, well, we'll plug in wherever you want. And our main thing is like, not to like impose anything. So if you really don't want to see us, that's okay too. So whatever it is that kind of the founder tells us they want, that's where we try to plug in.
All right. Thank you, Amy, for your question, and Minnie for the answer. I think we're getting towards the end of the hour here. So I think I'll close questions for now. I know there's a couple in the chat. So maybe we can get you in touch with Minnie to ask those questions, in particular if they're relevant in the future. So Minnie, thank you so much for sharing this lunch hour with us and sharing some insights as to who you are, how you got to where you are today, and to what TenOneTen is doing, because they are a great firm in our ecosystem, making investments in great local companies, which is something I totally appreciate as an accelerator focused on local companies. With that, anything left, Minnie?
No, it was wonderful to be here, and congrats on this program and being part of it. And I love this ecosystem. So Minnie at TenOneTen.net, you know, feel free to share contact if I can be helpful. You know, that's why.
Outstanding. And just to close, whose house?
There you go.
House. So thank you, Minnie. Thank you all for paying attention today, and we'll look forward to seeing you all at our next program.
Have a great afternoon. Thanks.